Greetings to all in the name of Jesus. Do you like stories? I like listening to stories, especially the ones that really happened. Today we will listen to a few stories about people who faced difficult situations. Each person had to make a life-changing decision. Although they faced different circumstances, lived in different places, as well as different moments of history, they needed to decide. If they decided one way, history would be different. Not only for them personally, but history for whole nations. Listen carefully. The Holy Spirit will be speaking to you through those stories. Open your heart and your mind to hear His message to you today as you face decisions you need to make. She was beautiful, young, unmarried. Like most young women, she thought of her life and wondered what the future will be like. Would she get married? Or remain with her parents her whole life? If she were to marry, who would she like to marry? What kind of person would be a good life partner for her? Would he be handsome, kind, rich? I wonder what qualities in a man would have been on her list. It was common that girls would marry a distant relative, but there were none around where she lived. She knew that some of them moved to another place, but that was too far, and they never visited each other. One of her daily duties was to go and fetch water for the family. She would join other girls from the village, but today she was alone. As she approached the well, she saw a foreigner who had obviously come from far away. She knew everybody in her village, so it was not difficult to spot the stranger. There were also camels resting nearby, another clue. She was curious. Who is he? Where is he from? What is he doing here? Did he come to visit someone in her village, or this is only a stopover before he continues his journey? She had no idea that because of this man, this very day, her life would be changed forever. Her thoughts were stopped abruptly, and it was the stranger who startled her with his request, followed by questions. He needed water to drink, but her hospitality went further. She also gave water to his camels. That was a big task, but she volunteered gladly. Little did she know that this very act was fulfillment of a sign this man requested from God. She noticed that he was watching her intently while she worked and saw him take something out of his bag. What a surprise! He gave her a gold nose ring and 2 bracelets. What girl doesn't like such gifts? Then he asked questions. Whose daughter are you? Is there a room in your father's house for us to spend the night? First question she answered politely by saying her name, and she also answered the second, saying that they did have space to accommodate him and his camels. When he mentioned Abraham, she ran as fast as she could. Now at home, she told her family what happened to her. Her brother went to bring the stranger in, and they looked after him well. They fed the camels, they prepared food for him and his entourage, as well as water to refresh themselves. But the guest would not eat until he disclosed the purpose of his visit. He wanted to secure the girl for marriage to his master. Her family decided to give their daughter in marriage. Now, finally, he could relax while she heard some answers to her questions about her future. She was getting married. There was a wedding to plan. Perhaps an even bigger shock came in the morning. This man declared he wanted to leave immediately. Her family wanted 10 days of farewell with her, but he wanted to leave straight away. They resolved that it would be up to the girl to make that decision. Have you ever been in a situation where you need to make a decision quickly, and that decision will completely change your life? I like to have some time to think, to evaluate pros and cons, to get familiar with the circumstances. She had no indication whether she would ever again see her parents or her brother. I'm sure she would have wanted to say a proper goodbye to her village friends, to have a party. She was getting married. It was a big deal. We find her answer in Genesis chapter 24, verse 58. So they called Rebekah and asked her, "Will you go with this man?" "I will go," she said. It was a very difficult time. 20 years of oppressive foreign government with military far superior than other governments. 20 years, that is a long time. A whole generation of people was born and grew up in this cruelly oppressive environment. Sometimes people just get used to whatever circumstances they find themselves in, but eventually all cruel governments are toppled down. However, nothing was happening for 20 years in this part of the world. And then a revelation came. She received a clear message from God which she needed to pass on. It was exciting news. God had a plan for freeing her people from this terrible oppression. She acted immediately. As per God's revelation, she had to deliver a message to a man who was going to lead the people out of bondage. It was an amazing plan, and she was eager for this to happen as soon as possible. God was going to lure the enemy forces to a large flat area near a river. She knew what God was going to do. With the heavy machinery that this oppressive government was counting on, it was to be the perfect trap. The area was prone to become impassable when the rain fell. And the name of the man chosen to lead the revolt meant Thunderbolt. It was all perfectly clear. The enemy army would be lured to this area, not knowing the conditions that, they would be stuck there when God sent rain, lightning, and thunder. It would be easy to overpower them and deliver the nation from the oppressor. She was a well-known person, very well respected. She served as a judge, and people came to her constantly to solve their disputes. So her request to fetch this man was obeyed straight away. They probably saw the excitement in her eyes. Something great was going to happen. What she didn't expect was that her excitement would not be reciprocated by the receiver of her message. When Thunderbolt came and heard the message from God which she delivered to him, he was not excited at all. He replied with an ultimatum. It is a strange ultimatum. Until now, in the Bible, we have only seen men go to battle. Women had other duties. She did not plan on being involved in this venture either. She had her duties. She was a wife, a judge, a prophetess. She already had plenty on her shoulders. His ultimatum was as follows. If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. She probably couldn't believe her ears. Instead of hearing, "This is a fantastic plan, I'm ready, I will do what you said," he basically said, I'm not interested. Have you ever been in a situation where you are busy with your life, you are excited about the new future ahead of you, and then something happens that demands that you completely change the way you look at things? What would she do in this situation? We find her answer to Barak's ultimatum in Judges chapter 4, verse 9. "Very well," Deborah said, "I will go with you." There are different ways some people stand out from the crowd in a community. A sure way to achieve that for a woman is to marry a man who is a foreigner. In close communities, everybody knows everybody, and such decisions are very important decisions to make, as the consequences last a lifetime. And that is exactly what she did. She married a foreigner. But that was only the beginning of her amazing story and often difficult life. Her husband had a brother who also married a woman from her village. I don't know who married first or whether they both married at the same time, but we can assume that it must have been easier for these women to navigate around the people who were talking about their decisions with two of them together. As the talk in the village subsided, she worked her way to fit in the new family where she now belonged. As it happens in new marriages, a lot of adjustments must take place. Each person brings their tastes, their habits, their manners, their language, their way of thinking, which needs to be explored, understood, challenged, respected, adopted. Another significant matter they were dealing with was religion. His religion was different to hers, and she began to admire his God and his religion. The first year of their marriage passed, and there was no news to share. The second passed too, and now the village started talking and speculating. Why is there no child yet in this family? As if it was not difficult enough for her to struggle with that issue, comments from others must have added to her difficulties. But the worst was yet to come. First, her father-in-law died. It was such a heavy blow to the family. Her mother-in-law was inconsolable. She liked her mother-in-law and they got along very well. It is something all mothers-in-law should learn, to be on good terms with their daughters-in-law. But as if the death of her father-in-law were not difficult enough, two more heavy blows hit the family. Her brother-in-law and her own beloved husband both died. Some disease took all the men in this family. What sorrow fell on all three women. It is hard to imagine what depths of sadness they must have felt. No husbands to look after them and no children to give them hope for the future. Then the news came, which was both good and bad. They heard that famine in the land where her husband came from, which brought him to this place, ended, and there was plenty of food there. That was good. But her mother-in-law now decided to return there. That was bad. What was to happen to her? What future was there for her? The initial decision was that the three women would go together. They were a family now, and it was good that they stick together. Preparations were made, goodbyes were said, and they were on the road walking. She was leaving the place she was comfortable with, people she knew, customs she knew, language she knew, to go to a place she had never seen before, to live with people she did not know. That is a difficult decision. But it was made and they were on their way. Then her mother-in-law stopped. She realized that it is too much for these young women, her dear daughters-in-law, to leave their people and come with her. She had nothing to offer them where they were going. Her mother-in-law said she didn't know how she herself would be accepted once back after 10 years of absence. How would she look after herself, let alone another 2 women? So her mother-in-law urged her 2 daughters-in-law to go back to her own village and start a new life. It would be easier to do that than to continue on with her. Have you ever been in a situation where life has given you so much grief? Your loved ones have died, and then you must make a difficult decision. Perhaps you also needed to leave your homeland to go to another country, another people. How difficult was that? Her sister-in-law decided that her mother-in-law had a valid point and reluctantly said goodbye and turned back. What should she do now? Join her sister-in-law and return to her relatives? Perhaps find a husband or remain unmarried for the rest of her life? Or stay with her mother-in-law and start a new life, without any assurance that there would be a future for her? Where would she stay? How long might she live? Where would she die and be buried? Her decision was firm and clear. We read it in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16. But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go." "He is doing what?" She was shocked. "He is covered with ashes, his clothes are torn, he is wailing loudly and bitterly and is wearing sackcloth," her maids replied. This was terrible news. She had no idea what in the world was happening with her dear uncle. Her love and gratitude toward him swelled. Images of her growing years flashed through her mind. She didn't remember much of what happened when her parents died, but she remembered growing up with her loving uncle who looked after her. He loved her dearly and did all he could for her to grow up with enough food, shelter, education. He protected her and installed a strong sense in her of who she was. Other memories flashed through her mind. How she was taken from him to join other young women in the royal house. A smile came across her face, remembering all the pampering she received for a whole year in preparation to meet the king. Then the amazing banquet when she became the queen. Royal life and duties separated her from her dear uncle, and she was not able to spend as much time with him as she wished. But to hear this news about his condition disturbed her greatly. Her first impulse was to send new clothes to him. Perhaps he was in financial difficulty and she was more than happy to help him out. But soon matters became even worse. Her uncle refused to take the clothes. Why? She had no idea and had to find out. She could not have imagined how bad the news would be. Although she was now part of the royal family, she was not an active part of the politics of the day. Her uncle was very informed of what was happening. Once before, because of him and her intervention with the king, her husband, the king's life was spared. But this time, the stakes were much higher. Her uncle sent her all the information, including the written publication of the new edict that affected everyone who was a Jew. Her uncle urged her to see the king, to beg for mercy, and to plead with him for her people. By now she was very aware of the royal protocols And due to the previous plot to assassinate the king, the security measures were tighter. Anybody approaching the king would be killed unless the king showed special mercy by lifting a scepter. It was too much of a risk. She didn't think that she could do what her uncle asked. I don't know whether her uncle was surprised with her reply, but he had a strong opinion which he shared with her. According to him, this situation was possibly the main reason why God allowed her to be in the position that she was in. And if she didn't step in now and fight for her people, it would be detrimental for her, while God would find other means of helping them. Have you ever been in a position of leadership where you needed to make a difficult decision, where you had to speak on certain issue or speak on behalf of somebody else who had no voice but relied on you to speak for them? What did you do? Did you speak out or did you keep silent? How did that make you feel? What would you have done in her situation? She seriously considered her uncle's words. Then she sent him her reply. We read in Esther chapter 4, verse 16. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go. We have heard 4 stories about different women in the Bible. Can we have one about a man? Some people can see the future. They are visionary leaders. They see a much bigger picture and adjust their life accordingly, as well as prepare their followers. He was one such leader. He clearly saw the future and tried to prepare his team for what was coming. He knew that for them it was going to be a very difficult time. So he tried to prepare for those difficult few days, devastating few days, terrible few days. For months, if not years, he had been trying to make them understand. It was to no avail. They were completely blind to his vision of what was ahead. And this evening was the last evening he spent with his closest team members. What better way to spend the last evening together before a big event than to have a dinner together? It was one of yearly occasions when families get together for this meal. However, he made sure that this one they would remember. So he changed some rituals associated with the occasion. When dinner was over, they went for a walk. It is a good idea to go for a walk after a meal. You should do it too. He told them that this very night, they would experience what none of them expected. They just had this special meal. Yes, it was somewhat different, but it was still great being together. They loved their leader and enjoyed spending time together. So again, they could not understand what he meant when he said that they would all desert him. This word he used meant that they would fall away, turn away, have their faith in him shaken, stumble in their faith on account of him. They would be ashamed of him and leave him. He knew how devastated they would be. He had to find a way to give them hope. Something that they would remember, something that would bring them out of the bottom they would hit. Something simple yet profound. Have you ever been in a situation when you needed to say something important to someone at the crossroads of life? What did you say? What did you wish you said? We read what he said in Matthew chapter 26, verse 31 and 32. Then Jesus told them, "But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." This was not the first time Jesus said, "I will go." Long time before the sin came to this world and the solution was needed, he said, "I will go." Although he knew it was going to be difficult, very difficult, it was going to be painful, he would be misunderstood, dishonored, disrespected, hated, eternally separated from his Father, and yet he said, "I will go." Why would anybody be willing to go on a mission like that? Today, we met Rebecca, Deborah, Ruth, Esther, and Jesus at major moments in their lives. They all had one thing in common. At the crucial time, whether it affected them personally or the whole nation, and one that impacted the whole human race, they needed to decide. Each time, it was a life-changing situation. The decision they made is summarized in these words: "I will go." Today, you are also facing a decision. God is calling you to go to your spouse and ask for forgiveness. You have hurt them in the past. What will you answer? "I will go." God is calling you to go to your neighbor. Invite them for a meal. Listen to their story. Share with them your story of how God has changed your life. What will you answer? "I will go." God is calling you to help those on the streets. Offer them food, clothes, work. Sit with them and listen to their story. Tell them how much Jesus means to you. What will you answer? "I will go." God is calling you to go to another country, to live and work there and share the gospel through your life. What will you answer? "I will go." What is it that the Holy Spirit is whispering in your ear? Where is God calling you today? What will you answer? May the love of Jesus empower you to answer, "I will go." Let's say it all together now. I will go.